tonight we're going to start Grimm's fairy tales. So the brothers Grimm, they were in Germany, I believe, and there's some famous stories, and the first one is Cinderella. Once upon a time...
What are the brothers Grimm?
Authors of some good stories. Once upon a time there lived a rich man who, after the death of his first wife, married the proudest, most disagreeable woman imaginable. His second wife was a widow and had 2 daughters who were just as unpleasant as she. The man also had a daughter from his first marriage. She was good-hearted and very beautiful, which made her stepmother and stepsisters jealous, and they began to mistreat the girl terribly. The girl was now made to work from dawn to dusk, cooking, cleaning, and doing all the other household chores. Her fine silk and satin dresses were taken away. She was given only a tattered gray smock to wear. She was no longer allowed to sleep in a proper bed either. Instead, she was made to sleep on the hearth among the cinders. So the cinders, the hearth is, where they have, it's the part in front of the fire. It won't burn because it's usually made out of like stone or cement or concrete, and little bits of ash and cinders from the burnt wood come out onto that part without burning the floor. But Cinderella's sleeping right where those are. It's not hot, right, but it's dirty. Among the cinders, and because of this, her stepsisters gave her the name Cinderella. One day, it was announced that the king was to give a great ball. A great ball is like a big dance party that would last for 3 days. All the young ladies in the kingdom were to be invited, for his son, the prince, wished to choose one of them to be his bride. So the prince is going to choose one of these ladies to be his bride. What if she says, "I don't want to be your bride"? Shouldn't it be her choice too? It's kind of weird. All right.
Whose choice?
The lady, right?
What lady?
He says, invite all the young ladies to the castle, and I'll choose one to be my bride.
If they want to be their bride, they won't come.
Ah, good point. Yeah.
If I didn't want to be his bride, I wouldn't come.
Good point. The king's messenger brought 3 invitations, but the cruel stepsisters told him there were only 2 young ladies in the household. As the night of the ball approached, Cinderella's stepsisters were beside themselves with excitement and could speak of nothing else. Now Cinderella was kept twice as busy as before. Her stepsisters ordered her to sew their gowns for the ball and to embroider their best petticoats. Embroidery is like fancy sewing to decorate, and to polish the diamond buckles on their shoes. At last, the day of the ball arrived. All day long, Cinderella was kept running to and fro as her stepsisters shouted orders at her. "Cinderella, iron my red velvet dress at once," cried one. "You must curl my hair," ordered the other. "Fetch my pearl brooch," said the first. Brooch is like the clasp, like a pin up here, and right around the neck. "Polish my ruby bracelet," said the other. Poor Cinderella hardly had a moment to catch her breath. Yet she was so good-hearted that she did all they asked without complaining. As evening neared, however, Cinderella could not help from saying, "How I wish I were going to the ball." Her stepsisters burst into peals of laughter. "You?" they said. "Whatever can you be thinking of? How can you go to the ball? And what would you wear? Your tattered gray smock." And then they laughed even harder. Cinderella said nothing. At last, her stepsisters were ready to leave. Cinderella saw them off and stood at the door staring after their carriage. After it was out of sight, she sat by the hearth and wept. I mean, she's crying. as though her heart would break. She was sobbing so hard that she did not see the strange old woman who suddenly appeared in the doorway. Indeed, she did not know that anyone was there until the woman came up beside her and said, "Tell me, Cinderella, why are you crying?" "Oh," she sighed, "it's only that I wish. "You wish you could go to the ball? Is that it?" said the old woman. Cinderella nodded. She shook her head yes. "And so you shall," the woman told her, for this woman was Cinderella's fairy godmother, and she had come to make the girl's wishes come true. "Dry your tears and listen to me closely," the fairy godmother said. "First, you must fetch the finest pumpkin you can find from the garden. Bring it to me, and then you will see what you will see." Cinderella did as she was told, and her fairy godmother waved a magic wand over the pumpkin. Instantly, it was transformed into a solid gold coach, like a wagon. Yep. "Now, we will go and look in the mousetrap," her fairy godmother said, "and see what we can find there." 6 lively gray mice were inside the trap. As Cinderella watched, her fairy godmother tapped each one with her magic wand. In the twinkling of an eye, the 6 mice became fine, gray, dappled horses. And a fat rat that was found in the pantry was soon transformed into a jolly coachman with the finest whiskers you have ever seen. Then the fairy godmother told Cinderella to fetch 6 frogs from the lily pond. With a wave of her wand, they became 6 fine footmen dressed in suits of gray. Cinderella was overjoyed, but then she looked at her clothes, and her face fell. She looked sad, for she was still wearing her old gray smock. "But how can I go to the ball dressed like this?" she asked quietly. "Do not worry," her fairy godmother replied with a smile. She touched Cinderella with her magic wand. When the girl looked again, she saw that she was dressed in a beautiful gown woven of silver and gold, and studded with precious jewels. The fairy godmother then pulled from her pocket a pair of the finest, daintiest glass slippers. Cinderella slipped them on.
Daintiest.
Small, tiny, delicate. "Now, my dear, you are ready to go to the ball," her fairy godmother said. "But you must be sure to leave the ball before the clock strikes 12. For at that time my spell will be broken, and your gold coach will again be a pumpkin, your horses, mice, your coachman, the fat rat from the trap, and your footmen, frogs from the lily pond, and your beautiful gown will once more be only a tattered gray smock. So 12, what time is that?"
Right now. 12 o'clock at night.
Right, also known as
Midnight.
midnight. Not 12 o'clock in the afternoon, lunchtime, right? All right. Cinderella promised to do as her fairy godmother had told her, and then she set off for the ball. When the girl entered the great ballroom, she looked so beautiful that everyone fell silent and stared at her in amazement. "She must be a princess from a faraway land," they all whispered. Even her stepsisters, who did not recognize Cinderella, were full of admiration for the beautiful woman. They paid her many compliments and studied her gown to see how to have one like it made for themselves. The prince, too, could not take his eyes off the beautiful stranger, and would not leave her side. He asked Cinderella to dance every dance and insisted that she sit beside him at dinner. Cinderella had never been so happy, and the night passed as in a beautiful dream. Cinderella was so overwhelmed with happiness that she quite forgot her fairy godmother's warning and only remembered when the clock had almost finished striking midnight. She leapt to her feet with a cry and ran from the palace as quickly as she could. No sooner had she run down the steps and reached the palace gates than her coach became a pumpkin. The beautiful horses were once again mice. The coachman changed back into a rat, and instead of her elegant gown, she wore only her old rags. The prince chased after Cinderella, but he could not catch up with her. In her haste, means in her, like, she's going very quickly, Cinderella lost one of her glass slippers on the palace steps. The prince found it and carefully picked it up. It was the loveliest, most delicate slipper he had ever seen. He carried it inside and showed it to his father. "I will marry the girl whose foot fits this slipper," he told the king, "and no other shall ever be my bride." Cinderella ran home and had just settled herself among the cinders when her stepsisters came out home. Pretending she had been sleeping, she asked them about the ball. "Oh, Cinderella," they replied, "you cannot imagine what a beautiful princess came there. Her coach was made all of gold, and her gown was so very splendid." Cinderella listened quietly, but she could not help smiling when her stepsister said, "The prince seemed very taken," it means he really liked her, "with the strange princess. He danced every dance with her." "Ah," said Cinderella, "the princess must have been very lovely. How I should have liked to have seen her." "Yes," said the stepsisters a little jealously. "She was very fashionable. Indeed, she dressed nice. But at the stroke of midnight she suddenly disappeared. After she was gone, the prince seemed to lose all interest in the ball. He found her shoe and swore to try it on every maiden in the kingdom until he finds her." The next day the king sent out his servants to try the glass slipper on all the ladies in the kingdom. Princesses and duchesses and great ladies all tried on the tiny slipper, but it did not fit one of them. At last the king's servants arrived at Cinderella's house. Her stepsisters were overjoyed, for they had often been told that their feet were exceptionally small and dainty. But no matter how they pushed and pulled and prodded and poked, they could not get so much as a toe or a heel into the glass slipper. Then Cinderella, who had been watching, said, "May I please try on the slipper too?" Her stepsisters rolled their eyes. "You," they said, "you who wear rags and sleep among the cinders? How can you possibly imagine that the slipper would fit you?" The king's servant, who had noticed that the girl was uncommonly pretty, said that it was only fair that she be allowed to try it on, too. So he asked Cinderella to sit down and extend her foot. The glass slipper slipped on as easily as if it had been made for her. Then, to everyone's amazement, Cinderella took the matching slipper from her pocket. At that moment, unbeknownst to everyone but Cinderella, the fairy godmother appeared in the corner of the room. With a wave of her magic wand, she changed Cinderella's old gray rags into a gown even lovelier than the other one. Now her stepsisters saw that Cinderella was truly the beautiful princess from the ball. Falling to their knees, they begged her pardon. It means her forgiveness. They're saying, "We're so sorry," for how they had mistreated her. And Cinderella, who was as good as she was kind, willingly forgave them both. Then she was taken to the prince, who thought her even more wonderful than before. They were married that very day and lived happily ever after.
Because that man said it was only fail.
Right.
Everybody gets to try.
That's right.